I think it's funny how often people feel the need to talk about a piece of media before that piece of media has actually come out in any meaningful way. It's weird to me. I understand, because like people want to talk about nerd stuff and see like talk about how it's going to be executed, how it's going to be done. I get it. But there is an aspect of that is weird to me when it's like we're talking about vapors effectively to a certain point. I want to get into something real quick before we get into anything else. This is the fan art section. Living Thrashcan said some beefy Suris, because to be honest, I want to draw Suris again and keep practicing. Hope you like it. I appreciate it, Living Thrashcan. That is fucking cool as shit, seeing your artwork. As always, Jesus Christ, sorry, indigestion. If y'all want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. That said, let's go ahead and get into the video, but first I kind of want to go ahead and throw my cards out on the table. So I am a person who grew up with Harry Potter. I am a person who adores the Harry Potter story. Somebody in the comment section is going to get mad at me about that. That's fine. I don't care. I've made peace with that because I also recognize that J.K. Rowling is a fucking monster, and I do everything in my power to make sure that a single dollar from me does not make it into her wallet. I've wanted to go onto Audible and listen to the new versions of the audiobooks that came out recently with full casts, and even though it would just be with my Audible credits, I know that brings a certain number of dollars to her wallet anyway, so I'm stuck trying not to do that. I do not believe in the argument that people have made for some reason that says that like there's an attention economy where, hey, you talked about Harry Potter, therefore that's as bad as buying. I'm sorry. I can't with any one of you. I cannot take a single one of those people seriously. I can't. When we start getting into the point where it's like 2 steps adjacent to thought criming to just talk about a series, no. I cannot. You need to do something that will affect the material world around you. That said, as far as the show is concerned, the new Harry Potter show / set of movies, kind of sort of, that HBO is doing, there have been some changes that they are making to some of the characters, but most of it's just having characters that sometimes are different races than the original, and that seems to be what people are angry about, even J.K. Rowling, and I'm gonna be honest, I just can't give a shit, but Nerdrotic seems to be very, very upset about this, so let's see what's going on.
Nerdrotic.com.
Greetings, you over 1 million filthy muggles and the 40% who haven't subscribed yet. Let's address the title of this video right off the bat. Some may say it's way too early to question whether or not the Harry Potter show from HBO Max is in trouble.
I would say it's too early, generally speaking.
Considering we haven't had as much as an official trailer or an official promotional image, and the only thing we have heard is a couple of off-the-cuff comments from a couple of actors, admittedly a concerning statement from one of the writers, and some bold statements from a couple of executives. We also can't forget one very concerning casting choice. With all that being said, it's understandable that anyone asking us
a very concerning casting choice, because black.
Simple question like, is the Harry Potter show cooked, comes off as a bit hyperbolic. Fair enough, but a big part of my job here, if that's what you want to call it, is pattern recognition. Tell me if you haven't heard this one before. Beloved intellectual property / story is announced to be adapted into a film or a TV show. After said beloved IP / story is announced to be a film or a TV show, it generates general excitement, or at the very least, cautious optimism in the fandom. Then showrunners / writers / directors are announced, and more often than not, they have questionable experience within the genre, and more often than not, they don't have any experience at all. Arguably, this is the point where we see the hoisting of the first red flags. Shortly after that, the showrunners / directors / writers with questionable experience in the genre or questionable experience overall claim they've always loved beloved IP / story and have always been big fans. Almost immediately after that, showrunners, directors, producers, and writers with questionable experience in the genre or questionable experience overall make a variation of statements including but not limited to, we're going to do things our own way, or beloved IP / story is dated, or we need it to reflect the world we live in today, or it needs to be updated for a modern audience. And more often than not, it's all of the above. At this point, there's more red flags than a CCP parade, and then there's the casting, which again proves that they're not going to respect the source material of beloved IP / story. They're going to subvert it. Fans of beloved IP / story voice their concerns over previously mentioned red flags. Fans are called a vocal minority of bigots who need to wait until they actually see it. Then product is released, subverted beloved IP/story fails miserably, and it turns out that bigoted vocal minority of fans who weren't bigoted at all turned out to be the vast majority and completely justified with their concerns, yet they are still to blame.
Okay, so no. There are aspects of this that are true. There are aspects of that. But like you're piling. What is she even barking at? Anyway, you're piling so many things together to make a very specific scenario, and not every single piece of media that you showed in this clip show actually falls under all of that. But the specifics of that aren't super important. The specifics about which parts apply to which pieces of media don't really matter because the conversation is about that in broad strokes. And in broad strokes, I will say this. You can have a show that is badly adapted and poorly received while also having the vocal minority, or not vocal minority, but like the people who are most vocal about it be the bigots, because the people who are, God, what's the best way to put this? The people who haven't grown up to the point where they can realize that a remake exists that does not do a good job of replacing the original or even stand on the shoulders of the original well, there are people who hang their hat on that so hard, and I feel like it's kind of a bit of immaturity personally. Like, let me give an example, right? And I'm going to talk about a thing that is good, and maybe that will show what I'm talking about. So Jess says, the worst to you, though. Let other people decide for themselves if they like the seasons or not. Okay, that's... I don't care. I don't care. I'm sorry, but I find the first bits of Steven Universe very, very hard to watch, and I find that show gets a lot better afterwards, and I've also found that that's been a general consensus amongst a fuck ton of the community, so I apologize, but I do not give a shit. I do not think the first few seasons of Steven Universe are very good, and somebody in the comment section can tell me that I'm wrong, but for a show that I love, the worst part about that show is its beginning. It is the absolute worst part of that show for me. I don't give a shit past that point. I'm not going to argue that point anymore. I don't have to argue that point anymore because unlike somebody who has to hang their hat on this kind of stuff, I don't give a shit. And I think that's kind of the point here. There are shows that people grow up with, and there are shows that people have very, very near and dear to their heart. And instead of trying to find a way to make that media accessible to other people in the best way they possibly can, instead, they will defend that media as hard as they can, saying that it is great, it is great, it is perfect, or they will defend that media as hard as they possibly can, and anytime somebody comes by and remakes it or changes something, then they will freak out about it. An example of something that's coming out soon that this is kind of happening with, and an example of something that's already happened where I've had this issue, let's talk about Resident Evil. That's the one where it's already come out. So I love Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think they're all fantastic games. I hate the remake of Resident Evil 4. I think the remake of Resident Evil 2 is great, but not as good as the original. And I think that the remake of Resident Evil 3 is barely a remake of the game because it's kind of a completely different thing in the first place, in just about every meaningful way. However, as an adult that doesn't have to hang my head on fictional media as the only thing I give a shit about, ignore the fact that I have the Pokemon Adventures behind me, Majora's Mask behind me, Sonic the fucking Hedgehog cereal behind me, and Magic the Gathering shit behind me. Ignoring all that, because there's a lot of fictional media that I adore, the stories that I love in that media, the way that media existed prior to a remake, still exists, and I still get to enjoy it when that remake comes out. So, Harry Potter. I like the books a lot. They were a foundational part of how I got introduced into reading. They are one of the reasons that I like contemporary wizard fiction. It's probably why I like the Dresden Files as much as I do. But if a remake comes out and fucks it up, it doesn't suddenly remove those books from existence. It doesn't remove those movies from existence. It doesn't remove my experiences from existence. It doesn't even spit on them. It exists alongside them. I brought up Resident Evil. Let's talk about the movie adaptation of Resident Evil for a minute. The movie adaptation of Resident Evil, the entire series, has absolutely bumfuck all, nothing the shit fuck worth to do with the Resident Evil series. It is a series of action movies that takes place with a handful of characters that have the same names, with a zombie apocalypse that does not function the same way and cannot be contained in the same way as the zombie apocalypse, quote, quote, that the Resident Evil series has. The Resident Evil series is largely a series about bioweapons being used and being taken down by various organizations. The Resident Evil movies are a bog-standard zombie apocalypse film with a corporate espionage backstory in the background that becomes important like 4 or 5 movies in, right? So, I still like those movies. They are horrible adaptations. Asinine adaptations. Every version of every character that has been brought over from the games to the movies is sometimes a lesser and sometimes not even the same thing as the version that exists in the games. The Chris Redfield from the games, much more relatable person than the Chris Redfield that existed in the 4th movie. The Leon Kennedy that exists in the games, different character than the one that shows up for a handful of microseconds for a cool scene, and I think it's the 5th movie, before dying off screen before another movie. Claire Redfield, borderline unrecognizable. Fucking Jill Valentine, they got the costume right, and that's about all they've got right. That said, I can still enjoy them on their own merit, and even when the movies suck, like Resident Evil 2, because that movie is pretty fucking awful, it doesn't take away from any of the games that I've enjoyed. The remake of RE2 doesn't take away from the game that I enjoyed. The fact that I got to do a sewer section for 10 minutes in the original, and it got to be really memorable, and I had to do it for 3 hours in the remake, and it was really fucking boring, and then they copy-pasted all that for Resident Evil 3, I get to ignore that if I just want to go and play Resident Evil 3. That game still exists for me to go play. The same thing is there for Harry Potter. Now, I'm going to give a version of this that hasn't come out yet, but Halo. Halo is a game that I grew up with. I played the campaign off and on with a friend of mine, and I played multiplayer off and on with my friends when it was the thing for the group to do. And I really, really enjoyed playing the game in the custom edition version because I got to modify the game and play as like Link in Hyrule Field and Halo, like all kinds of fun stuff in there. It wasn't until I played through the games with my girlfriend Saki that I actually properly paid attention to the story, that I actually properly paid attention to the narrative, to everything that was going on in that story. And it turns out that had I paid attention to that, I might have found another franchise to fall in love with as a kid. But instead, it was just a fun memory with friends that I got to properly fall in love with as an adult. Now, 343 Studios is remaking Halo 1. And 343 Studios has fucked up multiple Halo games. They made Halo 4, and they aborted something, and then Halo 5 came out of the mess. And then Halo Infinite was good. So I have to sit here and think about the new Halo campaign coming out. Instead, what I could do is I could just be excited. Because whether or not it's good, whether or not it's serviceable, whether or not it's something that I get to care about, the original game will still be there with the original stories, and if for some reason that's not enough for me, the original book will also still be there for me to read that story if I don't feel like playing the game, and I just want to revisit that world and that story. That is something that I will be able to do. I feel like there is a set of people who media is so important to them, their consummation of media is so important to them that when new stories come out, they can only focus on how things are being ruined instead of recognizing that the stories that they enjoy are never going anywhere. I don't think a bad remake destroys everything. I don't. But anyway.
A complete and utter failure of subverted, formerly beloved IP/story. Rinse and repeat. And the most notable recent examples of this, in no particular order, Velma, Willow, Witcher, The Wheel of Time.
Okay, so hold on. Velma. Yeah, that show sucked. That show was awful. But that show very, very specifically was like the 13th or 14th iteration of Scooby-Doo. And there will be other iterations that don't suck after it. Who the fuck cares? As for Witcher, Season 1 and 2 of Witcher were really good. I have not seen Season 3 of Witcher, but people hated that?
Beloved IP/story. Rinse and repeat. And the most notable recent examples of this, in no particular order, Velma,
Willow, I haven't seen, don't have an opinion on.
Witcher.
Witcher, I have.
The Wheel of Time.
Haven't seen, so I don't have an opinion on.
Ironheart. The
Ironheart, haven't seen, don't have an opinion on.
Marvels. Acolyte. The Rings of Power.
Acolyte, so I haven't seen the Acolyte. I've seen clips from the Acolyte. When I've seen clips from the Acolyte, I really like what I see, but I don't have an opinion on it at large because I haven't seen it yet. Though Star Wars is an interesting one for me because I feel like Star Wars fans in general are probably the worst part of all of Star Wars. Like, okay, I'm going to give you a real example, right? So Rey is, there's a person who I had this argument with. They were a friend of mine years ago. Maybe you would remember Bad Tempered Badger. We had a few live streams together, like I want to say 6-7 years ago. And me and them had an argument on Twitter about this. And the argument went something like this, that Rey was a Mary Sue because how could an untrained Jedi possibly do some of the things that she did? How can an untrained Jedi fight off a Sith in training? How possibly could that happen? That doesn't make any goddamn sense. Put a pin in that. Does it make no goddamn sense because it violates established canon? Or does it make no goddamn sense for some other reason? Said, well, it's not a thing that happens in Star Wars. It's not a thing that's happened before, was their argument. Went, okay, cool. Let's talk about Reign. Darth Reign. Let's talk about Bane, the guy who invented the rule of two, the thing that the Sith are known for. Two there always are, a master and an apprentice. And I pointed out that Reign, when she was a 10-year-old untrained child, killed 2 Jedi scouts. It was the thing that she did in her rage that caused Bane to realize that this is somebody who was worthy of him to take under the Sith apprenticeship. Now, he said, okay, but those were just scouts. And I said, no. What was I started doing the thing where I'm like, I'm just going to put on the Star Wars nerd cap real quick. Did you know that the scouts, the Jedi scouts, during Khan's War of the Jedi versus the Sith, right before the establishment of the Rule of Two, Jedi scouts were some of the best trained, most powerful Jedi you could possibly have on your force in terms of raw physicality. The reason for that was that a Jedi Scout needed to be able to fend off an ambush because their job was to scout alone or scout with a buddy. They had to be Jedi that could deal with overwhelming odds if they happened in general, because quite often they were walking into overwhelming odds because they were trying to get information so they could give the odds and all of the tactical data to their betters in the Jedi army. Or the Army of Light was what it was called at the time. So it said, not 1, but 2 of the most powerful ranking Jedi in the Army of Light during a time where the Jedi were operating primarily as a military organization, so they were better trained than most of the Jedi that we saw on Coruscant in the films, both killed by a 10-year-old because she had a fit of rage in the dark side. And then he's just like, that's different. Motherfucker, no, it's not. It's the same thing. That is an untrained character getting the better of their betters because the Force is a writer's toolkit to allow whatever the fuck they want to happen when they want to happen. Now, there are bad things in the Star Wars sequels. Absolutely. But Rey being powerful wasn't one of them. Rey winning fights wasn't one of them. Because, again, in Star Wars canon, that shit happened all the time. So, I don't know. When I see the Acolyte thing, I'm just like, man, as a Star Wars fan that has read a lot of the extended universe, it's weird hearing other Star Wars fans argue about shit they don't know fuck about.
Obi-Wan, Halo, Starfleet Academy, Doctor Who, Disney Star Wars, Kurtzman Trek, and there's a lot more to come like Narnia and possibly with the HBO Max Harry Potter show. I would love to be...
Old Thing gets remade. I don't like Remake as much as Old Thing. Tale as old as time. Has nothing to do with being woke, has nothing to do with ideology, has everything to do with the fact that Hollywood in general likes safe things, and when they like safe things, they get new directors to cut their teeth on safe things before they are allowed to go out and do their own things. Anyway.
Completely wrong about my concerns, and just once I'd love to see this pattern break, because what's going on with the Harry Potter show is inexplicably stupid. It bears repeating that if this show was properly cast and adapted, it would no doubt be the biggest scripted show in the world. Harry Potter is Star Wars for the millennials. An entire generation literally grew up with Harry, and that had a lot to do with the books maturing as they went along, not only with the characters but with the readers. It also doesn't hurt that the quality of the books improved as they went on, and they came out in a reasonable amount of time. And yes, I'm looking at you, George. Another accomplishment is getting an early internet generation to read books that have collectively sold 600 million copies worldwide. And for the ones that didn't read the books, they grew up with the movies, which have collectively grossed over $7.7 billion worldwide. And the reason those films were successful, despite the fact that some of them became Cliff Notes adaptations by the end, was because they stayed in the spirit of the source material and were properly cast. So what's there left to do with Harry Potter after surviving the perceived failure of the Fantastic Beasts prequels, which in truth only the last one failed, and a play that generally every Harry Potter fan hates but they still go to in droves, packed Universal theme parks with Wizarding World that recently expanded in Orlando, the boycott of the Hogwarts game that...
It says, wait, my spouse was a millennial, and I'm pretty sure those books didn't come out until he was in his 20s. I think the specifics on the dates don't really matter there. Like, the books came out when I was 11 or 12, I want to say, something like that.
That led it to being the best-selling game of the year, all from an author who has perceived controversial opinions on one single subject that the vast majority of humanity just so happens to agree with, yet...
Okay, so... All right. Fallacy bingo. Argument ad populum. It does not matter if the vast majority of the populace agrees with one thing or another if the science says otherwise. J.K. Rowling's opinions are not some small controversial opinion. They are, hey, let's eradicate the rights of trans people. Fuck them all. That is her opinion. That is why she wrote Turf Wars. That is what that is. That's not perceived as controversial. That is controversial. The reason that there is a smaller amount of the population that are pro-trans than a larger amount of the population that are pro-trans in terms of large broad strokes is because there's a smaller amount of the population that knows anything fuck all about trans people, because trans people make up 1% of the population. There are as many trans people as there are redheads within the population, so they are there, you have seen them, but they are shockingly, vanishingly rare to the eyes and periphery of most people. Especially because if we're talking about trans people like, say, Blair White or Buck Angel or my fucking girlfriend, they pass to the point where you can't fucking tell anyway, so you probably shat in a bathroom with them, or you probably sat down next to them on a bus or a plane and you didn't know they were trans in the first fucking place. So they, unlike a redhead, they are in your periphery and also invisible, like all of the disabled people in your life. So why did I point out the argument about populum? The vast majority of people having an opinion does not matter at all if the science says otherwise. And if you want to know what the science says about trans people, then I invite you to go over to Vice Rhino's channel, where he's got an entire set of documents about trans people, and everything you possibly could want to know is there. Or you can check out, and I hope K-Fox will put this in the description and put it maybe like right here, Forrest Valkai's video, Sex and Sensibility, which actually goes into the science of everything in regards to trans people, if you would like to be one of the shockingly few people that knows what the fuck they're talking about in regards to this particular topic. Anyway, J.K. Rowling's a bigot. She proves she's a bigot more often than not. She thinks that a bunch of trans women are actually rapists that are trying to invade her spaces. That's not a perceived controversy.
Strangely, the epicenter of entertainment in the UK and Hollywood disproportionately see things the other way. So to answer that question, what is there left to do with Harry Potter? Well, it's the aforementioned HBO Max streaming TV show, which was originally announced as an authentic Harry Potter TV series with new cast in the works. J.K. Rowling will serve as an executive producer on the series, which is billed as a faithful adaptation of the books. Well, that sounds familiar. A little over a year after that, newly announced Harry Potter TV writer Andy Greenwald said he does not like the idea of a rigorous adaptation of the books and said he has not read the books.
Okay, so that one right there, that one I can agree is a red flag. That one I can agree is a red flag. If there are some situations where you can not read a thing and still come out with a good adaptation, or, you know, you get Starship Troopers, which is a good movie, irrespective of what it is. But if you're not going to read the books, I don't want you working on that movie. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't care. Have you ever been, like, any of you who maybe have done anything in TV and film, or have played and done anything in the games industry, a common thing teams will do, like, this is where I actually have to agree with Nerdrotic, if what they're saying is true. A common thing that a director will do is they will get their entire staff and say, hey, we're going to be making X. I need you to read Y, or I need you to play Y. As an example, I adore the game Enter the Gungeon. I've put in 500 hours on that on the PC, 800 hours of that on my Switch. I accumulated that an hour or two every other day, just doing a couple runs and sucking at the game. But I love that game. That game exists because the developers of the game were playing Dark Souls and Binding of Isaac. So, of course, Enter the Gungeon is a combination of those games. It is a Binding of Isaac styled game, a top-down twin-stick shooter roguelike game, with the difficulty of a Souls game. That is what that game is. 110%. It is a nail-bitingly, frustratingly hard game that I adore. Enter the Gungeon 2 is coming out. If I found out that Enter the Gungeon 2 was being developed by a different set of developers, and that set of developers had decided not to play Enter the Gungeon 1, and had decided also not to play Binding of Isaac and Dark Souls, the games that were the direct inspiration for the original, that would be a red flag for me. Likewise, this is a red flag for me.
And that sounds familiar as well. So there were already small signs of beloved IP/story destruction until we got the biggest red flag or black flag of them all. With the cast.
Wait, is the biggest red flag that a dude is black? Your biggest red flag was not the guy not reading the books. The biggest red flag for you was that a black man was a part of it. Okay. Jimenon says the actors in the old Harry Potter films had to write essays on the books, but the writers don't have to read them. Something is wrong here. Yep.
Of Papa Essuito or Esiado as Black Snape, which was announced just a little over a year ago. And yes, I am counting the days until we get the first promotional image. Will it look like this? Or maybe this? How about this? Or this? Your guess is as good as mine, but when that fateful day
every single one of those was some kind of a racist stereotype. Ah, boy.
Happens, and I'm guessing it sooner than later, the internet will explode and the memes will be glorious. So despite the fact Papa Esiadu doesn't look anything like the character of Snape as he is described by J.K. Rowling in every possible and conceivable way, this blatant virtue miscasting creates...
Is it a virtue miscasting? My guy, he's just black. He's no different than anybody else. And if he doesn't look exactly like the character, I understand that being an issue, but, like, this is a character from a book. We can make him look different ways. So long as when he is in costume, I can very visibly tell, oh, that's supposed to be Severus Snape. I don't care after that point.
A lot of other problems with the themes of Harry Potter, which partially and allegorically dealt with the themes of prejudice through pure blood wizard and witch.
Nene says, or it could not be live action and it's a voice cast. It is live action, though. They've already... What? Like, no, that is the thing we know. That is something we do know. Senshini says Alan Rickman also did not look like that description of Snape. No, until he was in makeup and in garb, he's not Snape.
Supremacy over half-blood witches and wizards and those filthy muggles. So instead of having a broad allegorical theme that is accessible to everyone, the casting of Black Snape makes this theme very specific, creating a lot more problems that were unnecessary for the show and essentially
how does it create? It's a black guy. It's a black guy. But how does that matter? In the comments section, can you please describe to me why it matters that a black guy is there? Like, what does that do? How does that affect anything? How does that change anything? Like, if a Resident Evil game comes out tomorrow and Leon S. Kennedy is black because it's a remake of a game where he was already in, okay, and I don't care, like, that his race was not a part of his character. You can change that. It doesn't matter. It's fine.
It with the seal of modernity. Here are just some of the problems it creates. The Marauders, Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, and specifically Sirius Black and James Potter, Harry Potter's father, will be shown constantly picking on a little poor black kid named Snape. And how is it going to make Harry Potter's mother, Lily Potter, look when she is shown leading on the little poor black kid Snape, putting him in the friend zone, and then choosing the racist James Potter over him? On that,
you're thinking way too hard on this. I don't think they're going to be adding racism to it like that.
That note, how's it going to make most of the kids at Hogwarts, the Weasley children, including Ronald Weasley, look? And then there's Harry Potter, who despises Snape. And now you're going to portray Black Snape as a kid who grew up in a poor household with an abusive father who possibly abandoned him? And what'll it do with Snape's complexity? They made him a lot nicer in the films, and there's a good chance they're going to do it in the show. In the books, Snape was a very complex asshole, and the only reason, sorry, spoilers, he chose the good side was because Voldemort killed the white girl that put him in the friend zone that he was simping for. And those are just some of the unnecessary problems within the story. Then there's the ones around it. I've got nothing against Papa Essiadio, and he might be a great actor, and I would argue that this casting decision would be unfair to him, but he did take the job. I hate to break it to you, Papa, you being cast as Snape was meant to be provocative. And if you want to go that route, by all means do so in original.
And it might be, like, that's what happened with Finn, right? Like, the actor behind Finn pointed out that Disney decided not to do things with his character and effectively almost abandoned any arc that he might have had just so they could have a token black guy. Like, that does happen. I'm hoping that's not the case, but thankfully with this, we're talking about a property that already has its story written out, so we already know what the major beats are going to be with Snape. I don't know, I just don't see the issue with a black Snape. It doesn't fucking matter to me.
Works. I think One Battle After Another is one of the most overrated Oscar contenders since, well, Amelia Perez, specifically for pandering to all the right politics in Hollywood, yet it's still an original work. If they cast Snape accurately, none of these problems would exist. So you may ask, why did they do this? Aside from possibly being a critical shield for adapting the works of the perceived controversial J.K. Rowling, and hell, for all I know, J.K. Rowling bent the knee to get some of the controversy off herself by signing off on this decision. Or maybe she said no, but was overridden. All I know is this doesn't help the actor, this doesn't help the project, this doesn't help bring the fandom together. It's just another case of
nothing's gonna bring the fandom together. I don't think you understand how fandom works very well. Fandom doesn't work unless we are all at each other's throats. Let me explain. The Sonic the Hedgehog fandom is a constant war between people who like the games on the Genesis, the games from the Adventure era, which is the Dreamcast and onward-ish, until you hit like Sonic 06 and Unleashed, and then all of the people who love the games that are written like Sonic Colors, all the way until you hit Frontiers, and then you've got people who are mad about portrayals there. Like, you've got a bunch of fucking factions who, like, their version of Sonic is Jaleel White, or their version of Sonic is the version from the Archie comics who was, like, pro-monarchy. Their version of Sonic is the one from IDW who constantly creates his own problems. Like, their version of Sonic is always going to be this different fucking guy, and we are always at each other's throats. Yeah, Sakura says, if a fandom isn't splintering, it's dying. Yeah, the constant, like, the fandom fighting each other is evidence that the fandom is healthy, because the fandom fighting each other is evidence that the fandom is talking about your thing. They are having conversations about your thing. Now, granted, this is evidence that Harry Potter fandom isn't going anywhere because they're talking about a black Snape like it's no tomorrow, and they won't fucking shut up about it, but discourse with the fandom is not only expected, it is good. It is healthy. It is evidence the fandom is functioning. What do you think you're going to do? Just make a show that's going to make all the people who grew up with Harry Potter suddenly stop caring about it? No, it's not happening. That's not happening. The only things that have successfully stopped people from caring about Harry Potter have been J.K. Rowling herself. Most people who grew up with Harry Potter and ended up being fans of it, not the people who like read it and just went, oh, that's interesting, and then went on to another book, but most of the people who read it and really, really cared about it, really, really got into it, started going on to Pottermore and shit, started asking each other, are you a Slytherin or are you a Gryffindor? The people who really, really did that, who really got into that, those people largely never abandon Harry Potter unless, of course, they see what kind of monstrous shit the author is doing. And at that point, they start debating whether or not they can dip their toes in it anymore, or whether they can read, like, I've had conversations with people who used to love Harry Potter, and now when they read the books, they feel a little ill. They feel a little icky. Because they're like, no, I just can't. I just can't. I know what this author is doing. I know what she's using this money for. It makes me feel upset. I'd say, wasn't there an ist she missed? See here, Vinny Havoc says, considering Rowling openly consorts with neo-Nazis and fascist-adjacent people, yeah, she's unrecoverable. Vinny says, I was a hat stall between Ravenclaw and Slytherin. According to Pottermore, I'm a smart, ambitious person with, let's say, flexible morals. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. What else is going on in this chat? Okay. Point is, the people who care about Harry Potter aren't going to abandon the series because of this show. They largely abandon the series because of J.K. Rowling.
Using identity over authenticity. The bottom line, if you would have cast Snape accurately and maybe tried your best to get Adam Driver, none of these problems would exist. Answer me this, who would sell more merchandise, Adam Driver Snape or Black Snape? Now instead of I
like how it's Adam Driver Snape or Black Snape. We can't say the dude's name because your point, like I'm not racist, but I am reducing everything this actor may do or be with this character down to just the color of his skin. I'm not racist, but black. Okay.
Anticipation and excitement for a Harry Potter series, there's nothing but controversy. And although they most assuredly will be blamed, it's not the fault of the fans, the audience, the readers. No, the responsibility lays at the feet of the world's dumbest entertainment company, Warner Brothers. And I have yet to see something like this work, and it's more proof that Hollywood will never leer. And it would be bad enough if it ended there, but it doesn't. It is a shame because all the casting outside of Snape has been pretty good, including John Lithgow, who I think will make a great Dumbledore, who has been taking criticism from the true small vocal minority in the epicenters of entertainment in the UK and Hollywood, so he felt the need to kiss the alphabet ring. John Lithgow finds J.K. Rowling's anti-transmission stance ironic and inexplicable, speaks out on current war on empathy.
Is that it kissing the alphabet ring? My guy, he's just saying he doesn't agree with being anti-trans.
The article after...
Like, why is that a problem? It's okay to be anti-trans. That's fucking fine.
Complimenting J.K. Rowling for her works, when asked about the controversy, he says, I find it ironic and somewhat inexplicable that Rowling has expressed such views. Now, I'm not going to call John Lithgow an adult pretender. He is a true actor, and I loved him in Third Rock from the Sun. But I would argue that maybe if you had empathy towards J.K. Rowling and the vast majority of women on this planet, you may find her views on this specific subject.
Oh my fucking god, you're such a dumbass. Okay, no. If you had empathy towards the vast majority of women, maybe you too would be transphobic as well. No, that's not how this works. That is not how this works. Again, if you look at what the actual science says in regards to trans people and the actual studies that have been done on harm towards women or their ability to lift the same amount of weights and all that other shit, look at the actual science on this shit, and you will find that it's the transphobes and J.K. Rowling in general that are actually incorrect on this. And, yeah, no, as Sakura's pointing out in the chat, You get more cis women harmed by transphobia than not. If you have empathy towards cis women, then you shouldn't be a fucking transphobe. Simple as that. Simple as that. I can have empathy towards somebody and then say, by the way, also you're wrong. Then he says, whenever right-wingers complain about people they don't like kissing the ring or bending the knee, it just reminds me of how myopic and authoritarian there are. Because they seek a master to bow to, they think everybody else does too. And the only reason anyone would ever do anything is to obey a hidden master. Yeah. Ay. I'm at least going to make it to the 10-minute mark in this video. I'm at least going to do that.
To be sincere and completely understandable. But we're really not here to discuss this. It's what he says afterwards, which is the worst news of all. Speaking of J.K. Rowling, John Lithgow would continue and say, I never met her and she's not involved in this production at all. This contradicts what Casey Bloys, head of HBO, said just a couple of years ago. J.K. Rowling fairly involved in new Harry Potter series. I imagine she'll have opinions on casting, says HBO boss. He continues, she has been very involved in the process of selecting the writer and director, and
so you can have adaptations that barely involve the original author and still be good. The Boys exists. Okay, so if you guys don't know, The Boys, the comic, is kind of a piece of shit. The guy who wrote The Boys specifically wanted to make a super mean-spirited comic about how much he fucking hated capes and superheroes, right? If you've seen The Boys, the show, it has the same characters, but many of the plot points, many of the main beats, much of it is very, very different from the comics. So The Boys comics just oozes with hate. It's not enjoyable at all. Yeah, you can have adaptations that end up being different and also great. It's not a new thing. Okay, so I just wanted to double check myself and point it out because I mentioned The Boys specifically, and even the guy who made the original comics, Garth Ennis, he specifically points out that the show is a super, super loose adaptation, and at most he gets an executive producer credit, but when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of like how the show is made, he doesn't have anything to do with it. George R.R. Martin also had nothing to do with the Game of Thrones show after season 4, which I haven't seen Game of Thrones, so I know that it's supposed to like go off rails after a certain point. I don't know if that's after season 4 specifically, but like with The Boys, Ennis just isn't really a part of that production at all, and yet we got such a great fucking show. Anyway, I just wanted to double check myself on that, but I don't think I can watch any more of this. This is nutty. In conclusion, it's basically he really, really wants Rowling to be part of it, and he really, really doesn't want a black Snape. I personally don't give a shit that Rowling's not a part of it. I think the show's going to be better without Rowling being a part of it. And also, on top of that, I don't give a shit about there being a black Snape. That doesn't bother me at all. He can be black. I don't give a shit. Black wizards exist. You don't have to have the only black wizard be Kingsley Shacklebolt. That one's a little racist. That one's a little weird, right? You don't have to do that. Jesus. Tal says, I like Arnold Schwarzenegger's Running Man, but it is one of the worst book-to-movie adaptations I know of. Yeah, like, I also, like, I like I Am Legend and I like Omega Man, but I Am Legend is a really bad adaptation of Omega Man, and Omega Man is a really bad adaptation of the I Am Legend book, but all three of them individually, well, I've only seen the two movies, I haven't read the book, so I have no opinion on the book, but the two movies individually are really good, despite the fact that in terms of being adaptations, they are fairly awful at doing what they are supposed to do. Vinny says, wait, without Rowling? I thought Rowling was involved. So, HBO said Rowling was involved, and then HBO said, or one of the guys involved with the production said she wasn't actually involved. So I think if she is involved, she's involved in the same way that Garth Ennis is involved with The Boys, which is loosely based on or executive producer of there. Ansel says, and then there are adaptations where the only commonality is the name. Right, like, okay, I can give you an example of one of these adaptations I fucking hate. I hate World War Z. I hate World War Z with a bloody passion. I think that movie is fucking awful. But I love the book. I really like the book. The book's really good. And guess what? The World War Z movie, it didn't take away the book. I can still go and reread the book. I can still do that. I can still go back and read that. And the only thing that that movie and that book have that they share is a name. That's it. They only share a name. Ready Player One as well. I supremely dislike the movie, mostly because I wanted an adaptation of the book. But Ready Player One's not going to take the book away from me. I've read Ready Player One twice. I think that book is still pretty decent. It might not hold up super well because it's kind of tropey, but like it's still a really, really fun book. And that movie doesn't take that away from me. I don't have to sit there and bitch about the Ready Player One movie outside of the day that I watched it in the theater and came out going, man, I wish that the book that I loved was in that movie somewhere. Like, that's it. And maybe if I watch the movie again, maybe I'll find that I actually enjoy it more now that I'm not thinking about it in terms of the book. Because that's how I end up with the Resident Evil movies. I love the Resident Evil movies. I think they're fun as fuck. I also think they're really horrible adaptations. Really god-awful adaptations. Tal says, I like the RPO book and the movie and RP2. I don't know what that means. Acronyms are really cool, especially when I have no idea what they are. Sakura says, I watched Ready Player One. Oh, Ready Player One. Ready Player One. I like both Ready Player One, and the book and the movie, and our Ready Player 2. I haven't read Ready Player 2. I don't have an opinion on that yet. Sakura says, I watched Ready Player One. There were parts that were good. There were parts that were meh. My big problem with Ready Player One, the movie, is that instead of having the Oasis be a conglomerate of other worlds, it was instead a place where players had Fortnite avatars. Like, the idea of the Oasis in Ready Player One, the movie, is Fortnite. The idea of the Oasis in Ready Player One, the game, is closer to VR chat. So, it feels like the idea was different between the two. Anyway, I'm off track. Point is, Black Snape doesn't fucking matter, and even if this turns out to not be that great, it doesn't erase the books if you want to go pirate the books. It doesn't erase the movies if you want to go pirate the movies. Anyway, that's all from me. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.